Hey there, it's Brad Stevens, and in this video I'm going to read to you some of the writing from my book about spiritual awakening on the subject, What is Ego? The human ego is one of the largest problematic blocks to awakening spiritually and experiencing consistent peace and liberation in life. While many of its traits and expressions within us may seem entirely familiar and normal, they actually negatively affect our spiritual evolution and our efforts to raise our state of being to a profoundly new level. The ego is loosely defined as one's sense of self as a unique individual person. Try not to associate having an ego with being egotistical. Everyone has an ego, a sense of individual identity. You can think of it as your sense of individuality or personality, or the characteristics that define who most people believe they are, different from everyone else. The ego is a very strong component of our subconscious minds and has tremendous influence over our thoughts and actions. Our egos can make us say or do things completely automatically without having to think about it. The ego has a very strong mission, and that is to maximize one's sense of strength and worthiness as a separate individual. Very often, our egos may cause us to automatically show off, outsmart, seek approval, label, compare, judge, resent, or blame others in order for it to feel more worthy. The ego loves being right and thinking others are wrong. The ego can often slip into the role of identifying with being a victim of life's circumstances. The ego secretly loves drama and gets excited to either create it or get involved. It seeks chances to puff up its chest and compare its validity to others. The ego is largely a primal part of our minds based on survival and pack mentality. In early civilization, it was important for men to appear stronger, smarter, and more powerful than other men in order to rule over others and attract desirable women. Similarly, women desired to appear superior to other women in order to attract a strong male who could protect her in a society based heavily on dominance and violence. For our examples of the ego and its problems, we will use imaginary characters named Rick and Janet. Our characters have a tendency to look down upon people who appear to be of lower stature, ethnicity, intelligence, or physical appearance. Rick sees a man in his 40s working at McDonald's and casually thinks, he must be very stupid to be doing this at his age. In that moment, Rick's ego makes him feel superior, smarter, and better than the employee. Rick feels a stronger, more important sense of self in comparison. Janet is slim and looks down upon other women who are overweight. She has no compassion and views them as being weak, unintelligent, and unable to control themselves. Her ego gets a large boost from this because she feels smarter and more disciplined to be able to keep her figure in good shape while others cannot. Her primal sense of individual self-worthiness goes up, again by comparing herself to others. Rick is also quick to judge people of other races. He feels that his race is naturally superior and that people of other ethnicities are inferior. By looking down on others in this way, he again feels superior. Rick's tendencies are entirely governed by his ego's deep desire to feel stronger and superior as a separate individual compared to other individuals. His thoughts and actions are completely automatic and largely subconscious. He sees a person of another race and instantly he feels they are lesser than him. He doesn't even have to think about it or analyze why he feels this way. It's just an automatic response from the programming of his ego. Although it may not be directly visible or perceivable, Rick and Janet are essentially robbing energy from these other people. Every time Rick looks down upon another individual in a negative or disrespectful way in order for his ego to feel superior, he is actually committing a subtle, energetic violation upon the other person. Similarly, when Janet negatively looks down upon another woman, there is an unconscious energy violation occurring. Janet feels superior while the other woman feels negativity, even if she is not consciously aware that she is being judged. Janet also likes to play the victim. She is often complaining to her friends, such as how she has bad luck, was wronged by someone at work, or by blaming her boyfriend for her emotional troubles. Her ego gets a boost when others sympathize with her and do their best to tell her how she is better than the others and more righteous and worthy in those situations. Her ego is essentially feeding off the sympathetic energy of her friends to gain a greater sense of self-worth. Often she will bring others down by complaining about all the negatives in her life, because of this subtle forcing of sympathetic energy from others for the sole purpose of satisfying her ego. People like Janet are sometimes called energy vampires. Quite often, people like Janet have no idea why they have these tendencies. It is highly subconscious and automatic. All they know is that on some level, it makes them feel better to play the victim and gain sympathy from others, or to pump up their self-image by looking down upon others as lesser. Rick and Janet are genuinely addicted to their egos. They are deeply enslaved by the illusory sense of feeling good that their egos reward them with when stealing energy from others. Most of us have some patterns of comparison, judgment, blame, and victimization based on our past conditioning. These are all pre-programmed automatic responses caused by our ego and its obsessive need to maintain its sense of individual value and worthiness compared to others. The majority of all the drama in people's lives today are caused by their egos. The ego's energy-violating tendencies are like a subtle but rampant disease in today's society. Addictions to ego are often deeply entrenched, hidden, and problematic. It is the cause of all wars, as well as the typical confrontations of our daily lives. As human beings, our primary desire in life is to feel good. In a way, our egos can make us feel good by labeling, comparing, judging, resenting, or blaming others. It can feel good when one feels smarter, stronger, or better than someone else. But what we must realize is that this is a false sense of positive energy, a false sense of power by parasitic means, reinforcing a state of separation instead of unity and compassion. Every time we indulge our egos by expressing these traits, we create a significantly negative effect on the law of attraction. Expressing ego traits such as these immediately renders us of lesser value to a new emerging, compassionate, unified society and effectively blocks the positive flow of our higher spirit. There is a massive difference between the energy and vibration of a person who compares, labels, judges, blames, and resents versus one who exudes unconditional love, equality, and compassion for all. The latter is the state of being that you are moving directly towards as you master your spiritual awakening. It is this radiant state of being that makes you an irresistible super magnet for the greatest abundance and positive flow of higher spirit. If you are willing to recognize, tame, and reprogram your own ego's negative patterns, you will move towards profound positive improvements in your life. To let go of your ego's negative tendencies actually becomes a wonderfully liberating experience once you get over the initial resistance. Another integral aspect of the ego is its tendency to merge with what is known as a collective ego. This may be one of the many group identities that choose to divide from the rest of society in some way. Countries are one great example of this: American, Canadian, Russian, Chinese, and so on. National pride is a hidden expression of collective ego. To feel pride in one's nationality is actually one's own inner ego secretly expressing itself in that form. Instead of seeing humanity as a singular collective of God, the ego is choosing to divide itself and express its own identity as something that is separate from the other. It is secretly seeking to feel more worthy than something else through its expressed division from the collective of humanity. Pride may be one of the most hidden and difficult aspects of ego to see, because so many people feel a kind of fulfillment in expressing pride in some way, such as in the form of national pride. Those hearing this may feel a deep reluctance to give up their sense of national pride and identity, because it is so familiar and has been reinforced endlessly with a lifetime of group events, discussions, and television broadcasts. I invite you to take a moment now to observe your own inner sense of pride centered on identifying with your own country. Can you see your own ego using this as a way to create an increased sense of worthiness and division from all the other countries? As you progress along your spiritual path, see if you can recognize anything that creates any sense of division, separateness, or other within your own experience of life, and see if you can witness the hidden nature of ego inherent in those processes. Identifying with a particular sporting team is also a strong form of collective ego. The very nature of the ego itself thrives on separation, division, and competition, so rivalries and battles between sporting teams are a prominent lure that reinforces the normal, unenlightened egoic state of consciousness. One's ego can easily get caught up in identifying with their city's hockey team as one example. They get excited and celebrate when their team wins, and therefore feel a personal sense of success and winning within themselves. They secretly feel themselves to be superior to the other group in that moment, thriving on a sense of separateness and defeat of the other. They are unconsciously fueling their egoic sense of self-identity and division by making the team an aspect of their own self. However, when their team loses, a heavy sense of defeat, loss, or sadness is common, because that defeat is taken personally at the level of ego, which is one's imaginary sense of self-identity. One extraordinary example of this was during the 1994 Vancouver, Canada riot, where the Vancouver hockey team lost the final, most important game of their entire careers, competing for the Stanley Cup trophy. An enormous crowd gathered in the downtown area to watch the game on huge outdoor television screens. The collective ego of the crowd was at an all-time high, desperately hoping and desiring for their team to win, to find their own sense of self-fulfillment as being better than the other. Either the glory of winning or the crushing blow of defeat was at stake, and the tension was incredibly high. When the Vancouver team lost in front of this massive hometown crowd, a terrible riot occurred. So many of the fans had invested so much of their own ego identification with the Vancouver team that the loss was taken at an extremely deep personal level. Instead of feeling a calm sense of non-attachment because it was just a game, the true insane nature of the human ego was fully demonstrated. The sense of defeat, loss, and sadness was deeply stirred within the collective ego of the crowd, which triggered a lashing out of rage, upset, and non-acceptance in the form of a very destructive riot. Their personal egos were so hurt that they expressed outward violence and caused tremendous damage to the city. From an outside perspective, one can clearly see how childlike this behavior is. The ego is very much like an undisciplined child. However, it is within everyone, and it is everyone's personal responsibility to see it within themselves for what it is, and take the appropriate corrective action to transcend it to the next evolutionary level of humanity. The nature of collective ego also thrives in the area of religious division as well. One may express their identity as a Christian, Muslim, Jew, or Buddhist, for example. Individuals often express pride in their religious identification and thus feel themselves to be smarter, more correct, righteous, or valid in the area of knowing about God than others. This again is an expression and reinforcement of the divisive egoic state of consciousness, which is actually the opposite of enlightenment. An enlightened individual exists in a different state of consciousness with an awakened third eye, seeing the essence of God and creation within all beings in a state of total unity and equality. To awaken spiritually means to go deeper and move beyond religious ideologies to find a deeper truth, a deeper knowing of the true nature of God within oneself through this new awakened state of consciousness. In many other places as well, it is easy to find reinforcing experiences of the normal ego-based state of consciousness. Television shows and films endlessly depict scenarios of conflict, drama, and violence, all based entirely upon separation instead of unity. Reality shows thrive exclusively on the chaos and conflicts as people fight and seek to see who is right or wrong, who is better or worse, encouraging the ego's addiction to judgment and labeling others. While people watch shows or films of this nature, they are moving in the opposite direction of spiritual awakening. While they may claim that it is just a pastime and a form of entertainment, on an unconscious level, the ego structure within them is actually recharging and reinforcing itself. It energetically replenishes itself when it sees the hero defeat the enemies, and when jealousy, blame, and retribution are portrayed. The feelings of these portrayals create strong feelings within one's being that are all about division, separation, and a greater worthiness of one character over another. All of these aspects solidify the separation-based perspective that the ego thrives upon and inevitably support an individual's unenlightened state of consciousness. It is important to know that the ego convinces people that it is who they are. It convinces you that it is you. When the ego has taken you over, you completely believe that it is yourself, and everything seems normal. That is how it functions. That is how deceptive and hidden it is. The ego doesn't want to be seen, pointed out, or tamed. It instinctively fears its own destruction from these assertive and transformative approaches. It may convince you to ignore these writings as it senses its inevitable transmutation into enlightenment. However, it is also important to not think of the ego as negative, but to be seen compassionately as a life form within us that seeks expression and seeks to keep itself alive. It is a child that needs direction and training. A child dislikes being discovered that it is misbehaving. It wants to run amok and remain unconscious to how its behavior may be detrimental to others. It resists being disciplined and growing into something stronger. It is inherently immature and doesn't want to change. To awaken spiritually, individuals must step back from their ego to see that it is not who they are, but it is an identity formed entirely from past conditioning. They themselves are actually the consciousness of God witnessing the ego. They themselves are the one life, the one consciousness, seeing the illusory nature of the ego as a sense of self-identity. I'd like to thank you for taking the time to listen to this information and commend you on your commitment to your path of spiritual awakening mastery. I'd like to invite you to connect with me on Facebook through the links on this page. Feel free to share your feedback in the comments below, and also please have a look at my blog if you'd like to find more chapters and information along this subject line. Thanks again for listening, and I do look forward to connecting with you really soon. Take care, Brad Stevens.